right, so one of the questions that I've gotten is, how do you know which chords are major, which ones are minor, which ones are diminished? I mean, how do you know in your major scale? Like, how do you know that the one chord is major? How do you know the two chords minor? It's real simple. It's always going to be that way. You just have to memorize it. The one chord is always major. So in our C major scale, that C chord, which is built on the first degree of the scale, is always going to be major. Always. Okay? It's like mathematics. 2 and 2 is always going to equal 4. It can never equal 5. Right? It's the same exact thing with music. And music is very logical, and actually it's very mathematical. But the whole concept is, you just have to memorize it. This first chord from the major scale is going to be major. Okay, so with our C major scale, that first note is C, and the chord that comes from that is C major. Our 2 chord, or the second note of our C major scale, which is D, it's going to be always minor. Now, does that mean that you can't have a D major chord in some other scale? No, you can have a D major chord in another scale. But we're not talking about another scale. We're talking about C scale. Okay? So all of this stuff changes if you change scales. But the quality of the chord doesn't change. So major, always going to be the first chord from a major scale, always going to be major. So if I'm playing a D major scale, well, that first chord is going to be major. Or I can play it here. Okay? Always going to be major. If I go up to E, first chord, E major. If I go to F, first chord major. A flat, first chord major. A, so on and so forth. Okay, so the second chord in a major scale, always going to be minor. Never going to be like diminished or augmented or major. Second chord is always minor. So in our C major scale, the second chord is D minor, because D is the second note of that scale. Third note is E, so E minor. Because in a major scale, first one's major, second one's minor, third one's minor, fourth one's major. So in this case, our fourth note, or no, F, major. Okay? Fourth chord in a major scale is always going to be major. Fifth chord, always going to be major. And your sixth chord, by the way, that was a G chord. So G is the fifth chord of the key of C. And then if I move on up my C scale, go to A, the sixth chord is always going to be minor. I think maybe earlier I might have said major. Sixth chord in a major key is always going to be minor. Your seventh chord in a major key is always going to be diminished. Sorry. Criminy, I can't even make that chord. There we go. B diminished. And then it goes back to your C chord. All right. So the order is major, minor, minor, major, major, minor, diminished. Let's do it again. Major, minor, minor, major, major, minor, diminished, and then back to our major chord. So again, major, this is for a major scale, and we're talking about the chords that come from that major scale, and we're talking about the harmonized major scale, and we're talking about the fact that it's only triadic harmony, not seventh chord harmony. In other words, it's just 3 notes per chord. We're not talking about a C major 7 chord or some kind of weird funky thing, right? We're talking about triadic harmony, and the order of the chords is always going to be major, minor, minor, major, major, minor, diminished. Major, minor, minor, major, major, minor, diminished. Major, minor, minor, major, major, minor, diminished. And if you can just memorize that, then it gets a lot easier as you go along.